You're good to go?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay. I guess we can get started. Okay, we're going to get this show on the road here. Does anyone have any announcements that they'd like to make to the group?
Announcements?
No announcements?
I have a really big, long one. Okay. About 40 minutes.
Okay, then, without further ado, we have, tonight we're very fortunate to have Paul Orland. He's the CPO and co-founder of Tachyus, a software company who started in the oil and gas industry, and a former employee of Microsoft, worked on the Visual Studio team.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm excited to be talking about Python and Python tools for Visual Studio. At Microsoft, I wasn't actually working on the Python team or the Python tools for Visual Studio team, but my office mate was, so I planned to know something about this. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background and life at Microsoft a little bit too. My email, if you want to learn anything more after this talk, and my Twitter handle, I've tweeted about 12 times in my entire life, so if you want to light that up and make me feel popular, then that would be cool. All right, so show of hands to get started, because this is a talk about Microsoft technologies, and I was told by my friends at the Python tools team that I would see a sea of MacBooks out here when I was giving this talk. So just to gauge you guys' experience and knowledge of this, how many of you have currently or have ever used Visual Studio? Okay, so a fair amount. Have written Python on a Windows machine? Okay. In your Visual Studio? No one. Okay, so I'm going to teach everyone something new today. That's good.
All right.
How about anyone who knows of Windows Azure? Okay. Have you tried it? Okay. You use it frequently? Okay, so I'm going to be teaching these two things today. That's good to hear. So in this presentation, I guess the main thesis is that you can use Python on Windows and have a good time doing it. Python is well supported. There's a number of different open source efforts going on that make it possible and actually easy and fun to write Python on Windows, and particularly in Visual Studio. So I'm going to talk specifically about why Visual Studio is good as an IDE, how it integrates with certain Microsoft products, and specifically how you can use Python to build for Microsoft. To build for Windows applications, both in the cloud, on the device, on various types of devices, and all from Visual Studio. So Windows Azure being the cloud offering from Microsoft. So a little bit about me. I'm currently the CTO at Tachyus, and am building my co-founder Nathan is over here, the only other person in the room without a hard hat. Happy to tell you guys a lot more. I have actually one slide about this coming up, but I'm excited to tell you more about Tachyus. Before that, I built a SaaS recommendation engine with Python Django, so I've done some serious work with Python and Django, and that's the only reason I feel moderately qualified to be here. Also worked on the Microsoft Visual Studio team, so Visual Studio IDE, and within that, the Cloud Tools team. And I've done a couple of other side projects in everything from finance to real estate, and be interested in hearing what all you guys are up to too. Just to learn what the community is doing. So Tachyus, basically what we're doing is technology to optimize energy production for the oil and gas industry. So the oil and gas industry is a hugely important industry, especially today. There's 1.3 billion people that don't have reliable energy, and even so, the oil and gas industry is the other 6 point however many billion people that it's serving are paying $4 trillion, and it's only growing as an industry. So basically, the problem we're solving is that producers, so people who are actually pumping the oil out of the ground, are underserved by their software. Somewhere between 10 and 15 years old, they have multiple applications they use at once, and it's a pain. So basically, we're bringing things like real-time data collection, predictive analytics, project management, forecasting to the oil field. So there's a lot of exciting technology that's going into this effort. So we actually use F# in Windows Azure, but we have a lot of other technologies going on. HTML5 for our front ends, Objective-C for our iPad apps, and we're doing some data science and actually some pretty neat computer vision stuff in Python. And I can tell you also a little bit more about that after the talk if you're interested. So we're hiring full stack engineers, and I'm excited to be here talking to a lot of smart people. I'm sure smart people like Python. So if you are interested in talking about what we're doing more, let's talk. So a little bit further in my past at Microsoft. So assuming not many of you are up to speed on how Microsoft is organized or the various product offerings, you may have heard we have a new CEO who I'm excited about, who's actually my boss's boss's boss. Previously, he was running the server and tools division at Microsoft. So basically all the products that are doing well and continuing to do well. The cloud, the IDEs, the server, and SQL offerings from Microsoft, which kind of behind the scenes are making everyone happy and kicking moving. So Microsoft is in Redmond, Washington, which relative to Seattle, where the pin is over here, is kind of on the east side. And within the campus, there's the Visual Studio building where I worked. And specifically in that little corner was where my small section of the Visual Studio team that worked on the Windows Azure product specifically worked. So a little bit more geography than you probably care about. But I had a very interesting team at Microsoft in that it was people working on the cloud, working on a bunch of different languages. Basically, the entire Python development effort at Microsoft was in my hallway as well. So it's interesting how these people all fit together. That was me. My roommate was Steve, who's on the PTVS team, Python Tools for Visual Studio. If you go online and listen to some of the YouTube videos explaining the tools, he's the one with the great Australian accent. Dino across the hall, also Python. Then we had guys working on cloud, Office, cloud, Python, cloud. Node.js was stuck in there, F#, and cloud. So a lot of stuff going on, and I got to see a lot of things in Python as well. So next up, writing Python in Windows. So you guys had said that some of you had used Python in some capacity on Windows before. So there is data for everyone who is doing this, and CPython.exe is only a subset of people that were using Python on Windows, but there were a lot of them. Any guesses as to how many downloads CPython.exe got in 2012?
100,000.
More.
2 million.
21 million. I'm not sure if you can a lot.
Wow.
So people are using Python on Windows. That's really incredible now.
Is that downloads from python.org?
I forget the exact source of this. I think there are a couple of independent distributions that are not just python.org, and those aren't counted in this.
Okay.
I think this is just python.org. Yeah. So the Windows-specific Python implementation, or one of them, is IronPython. And I'm going to do my best to explain how it works at a high level. This is something I'm a little fuzzy on, but I think it's the important thing to take away from this slide is that IronPython is the implementation that plays well with .NET. So the reason it exists is to compile kind of like F#, C#, and VB, which are the hardcore .NET languages compiled. And consequently, there's good interoperation. So basically, you have C#, VB, or F# code, and you roll down to that Python code as well. So C#, VB, and F# all go through the regular compilers, and Python code is interpreted by IronPython. And then they kind of enter this black box called the Common Language Infrastructure, which is the intermediate level that allows the language interoperability that Microsoft offers. So they compile to this kind of intermediate language called the CIL, which, if you're using C#, VB, or F#, comes through something called the Common Language Runtime, and is actually interpreted there. So for Python, there's actually the CLR and something called the DLR, the dynamic language runtime. So it's a little bit different from the C#, VB, and F# path. And this is the same way that things like the Ruby implementation for Windows is done, and the Scheme implementation for Windows, and a couple others. Beyond this, I can't really be too helpful. There's some kind of deep witchcraft that goes on that actually leads to your program being executed. And this is like just-in-time compiled or something. And like I said, I'm a little fuzzy on it, but I think it's black magic. So if you want to get IronPython, go to ironpython.net. I didn't find any good statistics about how many IronPython downloads there were. I don't think there are any on this page, but IronPython is, once again, the open source implementation that plays well with .NET. And also, if you want to basically go through the things that I'm talking about in this presentation, you're going to have to download. Yeah?
Is Microsoft still developing IronPython? I thought I heard there was back down to that.
So my hallway mates were previous IronPython involved with IronPython through Microsoft, and they are not now. So that is the extent of my knowledge. I didn't dig too deep into that, but I think IronPython is now a community-driven thing. And I hope this is being broadcast online. I hope there's no one from my team watching and cringing as I say a lot of incorrect things and accuse them of witchcraft. Things like that. So Visual Studio, and half of the title of this talk is Visual Studio. And Visual Studio is the Microsoft IDE. So if you want to build anything for Windows, if you want to use a Microsoft language like F#, C#, VB, or IronPython, you do it in Visual Studio. So there's a couple of key components that make Visual Studio a good place to write code. Language support, like syntax highlighting, code completion. So very basic things. There's some GUI builders, or if you're building phone applications or desktop applications with GUI involved. There's debugging, profiling, and optimization tools, so you can step through code, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Source control is integrated by a Team Foundation server and Git. I am personally not a fan of doing source control IDEs, but it is available. There's testing, so there's a built-in testing kind of window where you can run all your tests and see what passed and failed directly from the browser, run subsets of your test, and also debug your tests. There's publishing, which I hope I'll be able to show off at the end. So if you want to build your Django website and push it to the cloud, you can do that pretty easily. Finally, there's a suite of, there's a suite of Agile development and collaboration tools called Visual Studio Online, which is relatively new. But basically, if you want to do Agile management and have your burn down charts and your task and bug management, then you can do that all through a offering that's technically under the Visual Studio name. Finally, and excitingly, there's extensibility. You can build a lot of things on top of the Visual Studio. So it is actually the tools that I was using within Microsoft to build tools for Windows Azure, and the tools that my coworkers were using to build this PTVS, Python tool for Visual Studio, are available, and you can actually create IDE extensions that support new languages and things like that. So PTVS, Python tools for Visual Studio, is a free open source plugin that turns Visual Studio into basically a full-featured IDE for Python. So if you've used, if you use an IDE for any language, you can think of the features that I'm talking about, and I'll go through them a little bit more in depth. But you basically feel like it's a good place and happy place for you to write Python. So PTVS works with CPython, IronPython, and all of your favorite libraries. So you can basically do whatever you want, and then you could do on a Mac or a Linux machine in terms of having library availability. And you also have IronPython, so that's more for things that require .NET interoperability. So to get Python tools, you go to pytools.codeflex.com, and these slides will be available for download afterwards.
Yeah, they'll be viewable through the presentation afterwards.
Yes. Yes, I believe so. I am using, for these on my presentation, Python 2. But I believe Python bootstores, or this might be another current development by Brendan Prince. And as you can see, there's been 129,000 downloads of PTVS. I don't know what range that's on, but there are people, I mean, none of you in this room, I guess, but there are people excited about this product and using Python in Visual Studio.
So it's a plugin for Visual Studio?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a free version of Visual Studio, or is
Right, so Visual Studio goes from free to very expensive.
okay?
And I mean, actually, yeah, there are various arrangements as a startup. We're getting basically some good licenses of Visual Studio to give to all our employees like that. Yeah.
Question. That is another free version.
Yes. Yes.
2008, 2010, which
So Visual Studio, when they made releases were 10, 12, and 13. I personally used it on 10 and 12. I'm almost certain the 10 is supported, but I don't know before that. Hopefully, no one is using the version before that. And as Microsoft likes usually go, people are sometimes do that. So anyway, high-level overview of things that you will find in Python tools for Visual Studio. So once you've downloaded and installed this plugin for Visual Studio, you will get a number of features, some of which I will demo today, and some of which I will leave for you to go and explore. So syntax highlighting Intellisense, which is basically Microsoft's, I think it's Microsoft's word for all of the fancy things that you can do to navigate code and have auto completion and those kinds of things. Finding and browsing. If you see an identifier in your Python code and you want to find where else it's used, you can click on it, right-click, and kind of navigate around to wherever the other places in your code that you're using it. So there's good cloud support. You can create, as soon as you've done this, you can, one of the project options you can select starting a new Python project is a Django application, which you can then directly deploy to an Azure website on Windows Azure, which is Microsoft Cloud, or an Azure Cloud Service. So the difference between Azure websites and cloud services is I'll talk about it in a little bit, but roughly you can deploy your cloud tools directly from the IDE. So there's also things I mentioned before, like project management, solutions, and Git support. These all work for Python. There is a built-in, so the built-in rep will read, evaluate, print. Does anyone know what the else is? Loop? Yes. Read, evaluate, print, loop console, which is both built-in and for IronPython. And you can get inline graphics to it. So you can see there's a little, I wish I had a good demo for this, but unfortunately, I had to pick and choose from things I could show you. So I'm not showing you the built-in graphics. Python debugger and .NET debugger, remote debugger, Mac and Linux debugger, and mixed C++ debugger. All these things work together. So basically, if you have code that is either running remotely or running locally and basically touches a lot of different languages that are interoperated, you can debug seamlessly between possibly the most important being the C++ debugger for most people. Parallel watch view to help with debugging. This is just you can use CPython, IronPython, or interpreter that you choose, and profiler with A/B comparisons again to evaluate how well your code is running. By the way, I didn't say this at the beginning, but if you have questions, feel free to shout out at me if I'm just looking at my screen. All right, so I'm actually going to show you now some of the cool features that I just described, and when Dino and Steve, my former coworkers, gave these presentations, they said they got thunderous applause for joining this talk. So I hope that I can impress you guys as well. Yeah, you see Django now, right? I need to. Sorry about this. Oh, there we go. So if this is the worst technical mishap ever made. Right, so open up Python tools for open up Visual Studio with the Python tools installed. If you're watching this at home and following along, you can install Python tools and IronPython with the links I gave you as a prerequisite to running this, and then basically everything I show you should work out of the box. So the obligatory 0th bullet point here is that you can run Python, so I'll show you how to do that. Up here is the Start button, which basically starts the program in debug mode with the Visual Studio debugger attached. And if this works, yes, you should see hello world. Cool. So I have proven to you guys that Python can be written in Visual Studio. Time for level 1. So Visual Studio knows a lot about the code that you're writing. So what I wanted to show you here is if I have a function and I say I don't want to write, or I want to import some math functions to do whatever I'm working on. I can, I basically can get a list not only of libraries that are available to me, but it will filter as I type. And so I found math, and I want to import Py. So this gives me basically everything that's inside of the library for me to use. So this is great if you're starting to get to know Python. I guess you guys are all experienced, but if you're starting to use Python or even just don't have a good track of all of the libraries in your mind, you can start typing, and ideally Visual Studio will help you think of what you're trying to run. So I can do something nice like from a new library?
Yeah, you want to add to the library.
Take your so over here, yes. So the key to doing that is you can set your Python environment. So actually, I'll show you this now. You can create a virtual environment, which is probably how you're usually going to be working if you're installing a bunch of libraries. So if I here have the option to select IronPython, IronPython 64, or just CPython 2.7. So I'll do that one and show you how this works. So now I have this. So I have a new Python virtual environment now, and I've now selected this virtual environment. So based on which environment I'm in, if I just choose the regular 2.7, it'll take whatever version of the library that's installed and refer to that as the source of truth for the Intellisense. Does that make sense?
No, I'm saying if I actually create a new module,
oh, yes.
Outside of that, how do you attach it to the 20 or how do you know? Not from
this is also something that I consider witchcraft, but it does work, and I'll show you that in a second. So if you're asking if you create a class in a different file,
right,
and you want to use that class, so you're basically seeing your own things come. Yes, so that works. So for example, I have defined a class, which you'll see in a subsequent example called human. So I'm in F# world. This is that. If I wanted to say my partner's name is Bacon, if I wanted to say Bacon equals, I believe it's in this person.py file. So from a person, import human. So my co-founder Bacon is an instance of human. Yeah. So this works. This is not what you wanted to see. I guess you wanted to see the drop down over here. Let me do import person. Yeah. So you see we got the drop down here, and there's also some weird things going on here, which you'll see in a minute. for a subsequent example. So another cool thing that I like coming from F#, which is a strongly typed language, is Python kind of gives you a perspective into what's going on from the sense of typing in your, or PTVS gives you a sense of what's going on in terms of Python, or in terms of typing within your Python application. So I can hover over things and I can see that radius here, so actually foo, which finds the area of a circle, returns a float. And I can see that radius is expected to be an int. And it knows that because here I passed in an int. So even though type inference isn't that important as a part of Python, there is some type inference going on in this implementation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through the examples. Really the font big enough for you guys, by the way? So Visual Studio suggests overrides for classes as well. So Visual Studio actually, it's not just knowing what things to import, but it has kind of a deep knowledge of how your class hierarchy works and what methods you're allowed to call at any point. So, for example, if cat is going to implement beast, I don't think the cat will roar. It will probably meow or something. And sorry, I skipped over, thinking about what noise a cat makes, I skipped over the important part of the example. But here, if I start defining a function, so I had to give it a second to start thinking again. But it knows that I want to override, or it has a list of overrides kind of understood that I might want to get from beast, since I'm defining cat inheriting from beast. And then basically all I can do is press tab, and then I can complete my code as I write it. So I want to make my cat meow, and maybe my wolf will howl. So there's a bunch of built-in methods that every Python class has. And these are the ones that begin with double underscores. So these are all available too. If you start typing and I want to create a constructor, I can get basically all of that by indicating that I want to type in it and then hitting tab. So this is convenient when you forget this super syntax. I'm on Stack Overflow searching for the super syntax almost every time I define a class in Python, but that's a useful thing for remembering all that. So I mentioned a little bit before that Visual Studio infers types where it can. So my cat up here has 9 lives, and think that we'll think that yes, the number of lives here that my cat has is an integer. And I don't know if you remember foo that I described above. If I don't, I can hover over it and see the doc string here that tells me foo finds the area of a circle. It returns a float and it takes in a radius. So now that I've given it a float, so radius now knows that it could be a float element. So this is cool. It looks through all of your code and finds out how you do things and uses that to inform this IntelliSense hover text. So in a not safely typed language like Python, you can actually kind of have a little bit more information and catch your bugs before you introduce them, at least when they're in the types. So I had a little fun testing this, how well this worked by basically introducing this function that would possibly return an int or possibly a float, and saw if that would work too. And I was impressed that it handled it pretty well. So if I create a werewolf and ask what danger level it is on a scale of 1 to 10, I have 2 states where the werewolf is either a man or a wolf. In one case it's 2, or at one point it's 9.9. And it can be either one of these. So basically, the exciting thing here is that Python knows that it's possible that this either returns an int or a float. So it tells me that those are both possibilities. So what do you think if I uncomment this and type a dot after this variable LVL? What do you think I'm going to see? So this could either be an int or a float.
You see the attributes of the class?
Right. So these are attributes of, since LVL is either, we found out it's either an int or a float. So very nicely here, we get all the float methods and all the int methods. And some of them, for whatever reason, the imaginary part of a complex number and I think the other complex number functions are the only ones that work for both int and float. But once again, this is a pretty easy way if you're kind of just writing code and typing along. As long as you're watching this window as it comes up, you can kind of see when mistakes are possible. So yeah, if I'm afraid of making integer operations a floating point or vice versa, I can avoid that. All right, so I already I showed you how cool the docstring is if I'm really bad at naming my methods. I can go back and see exactly what they do. Or rather, I can see from right here what I said they do. If I want to go back and actually see what I did or see what my friend did, I can go to the definition directly here by pressing F12, and it jumps me back up to where the function was defined. And this isn't the same file, but it also works between files, anywhere within your project. So this can be useful for debugging big projects. So if I want to also find all references of this method foo, I see that there's a couple here. I can pick among them and jump between them. So there are 3 places that I use this this function foo. So maybe I decide actually that foo is a really bad name for a function that finds the area of the circle given the radius. So something I can do is refactor from here and rename it to, I don't know, circle variable. I get a nice little preview here of all the things that I'm going to implicitly be changing by renaming this function. So this is kind of a cool thing about just text searching that kind of knows a little bit more about code than a simple find and replace in a text editor. So I can apply this, and this is always a risky feature in any IDE that I've used it in, but so far my experience with the Python Visual Studio plugin has been good. So if you want to get more into code,
What if you had code that was commented out?
so if you have code, it knows that, yeah, it knows that that's not.
So it would not change the commented out code.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, yes, I don't know if there's any tools that attempt that, but as obvious
It
trade-offs.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
It shouldn't. That's what it should do.
Right.
It's just that if you like it back.
Yeah, that's a risk, yeah.
What's the scope of this, I guess, function or class name change? Is it only to be in that document or in that environment or across it within your whole?
I can safely say it's within the entire solution. So the solution is a Visual Studio term. So this is kind of the highest level of organization within a Visual Studio endeavor. Without using the word solution. So within the solution are various projects. So these are traditionally in .NET, you have different projects when you're targeting to make multiple different assemblies. So it would look like an exe and a couple of DLLs or something. And you can actually have that output if you are doing that. Yeah?
What happens if you have another source file that also defines a food that you will not use?
Or a completely different variable.
Yes, that's completely different.
Does it know they're related?
Because they're not related.
Yeah, so I can only assume, based on the intelligence of my former coworkers, that they did a good job of this. In most cases, I haven't had problems with that, but I haven't run it. So I can basically give you the negative answer, which is I haven't had that problem before, but I can't tell you for sure that it's true. Yeah.
You're asking if there's a different module?
No, if you just have the same variable name in a different one that has no relationship to.
In a different file? Or?
Yeah.
In a different
Yeah.
file, there's
I would
another
guess that
function named food.
I'm sure it would know based on the modules that you're importing in the script which foo you're talking about. If it's bar.foo or baz.foo, it would know which one you're importing.
Right. So this is a delicate process for a number of reasons. Like commenting code is one of the edge cases that you have to think about. But you can certainly push anything far enough that it'll break. But I never had any problems with conflicts, and the window that comes up helps to kind of make sure that it's doing the right thing.
It's just an improvement on raw search text replace.
Right. Yeah. And you may be familiar with some. Actually, I meant to do another show of hands. I forgot to include it. But how many of you, or maybe shout out would be better. What kind of development environments are you guys using currently?
PyCharm.
PyCharm. Okay. I used PyCharm for a while. Okay. Emacs or Emacs. Okay. Yeah, I'm using a lot of mouse to my presentation.
I use Sublime Text.
So, I prefer Windows applications. I prefer pointing and clicking, so IDEs are my thing. But it's good that you guys are coming from a variety of so yeah, any more questions about that I can answer? So debugging is, in my opinion, the coolest thing and a less common feature. So if I wanted to, I have this code here that I'll uncomment. I guess I should tell you that I can press Control-K, Control-U. There's all the standard hotkeys that you would expect in an IDE to do things like uncomment and do basic code manipulations. So here's some code. I have no idea what it does. So I'm instantiating myself as a man. Let's see, is that right?
Or human.
Human? Was human the type? I think I might have changed it. I actually ran into your problem. That's interesting. I changed, I refactored the type from man to human, and it was commented out. So there you go.
It's just a simple find and replace
No, we didn't change it.
It's not just a find and replace.
Well,
So,
if it's commented out, then you want to use find and replace.
right. So if you wanted to replace everything in your entire document, then you would use find and replace. So this is a intelligent way of picking things by context that are only in code in the correct. So based on the scope of the variable that you're talking about. Yeah. So and I wish I could tell you more details, but it basically is everything short of like looking in the comments, looking in the documentation, looking in non-Python files, for example, stuff like that. So here I got my person.human again, and we're going to see how that works, I guess. And I have this method, hokey pokey, that I can perform on a person here, and we're going to find out what it does. Shoot, we've got to type that up here. Let me just comment this out. We can forget about this for now. So I'm going to go back down here to my hokey pokey, see if I can see where it's on there. That was another joke. Okay, something's going wrong. I'm doing way more hokey pokey and a key error or something. Yeah, this is going really awry. So what I can do is I can stop my debugging and put in a breakpoint at hokey pokey so I can step through it and start to learn what it's doing. So if I start with the debugger active, I've just hit this breakpoint and I'm now at hokey pokey. So look at Paul. So Paul, let's see, doesn't know much more about me right now, but we'll see if we keep going, if it learns more. And hokey pokey is this function that I can learn more about. Probably the best way is to keep debugging. So up here we have a few more tools that we can use for debugging in addition to the little play button. There's the stop debugging button, which would it would close the program that's running. There's step into, step over, and step out. So if you've used any debugger before, these are typically to be found. So let me step into hokey pokey and see what's going on. So I have this convoluted object-oriented code around how I'm going to get my appendages in order to put them in and put them out and shake them all about. So I can do things like step into appendage factory and see that it's just an extremely ridiculous method. I can say I'm going to step out of that now. Step over, so now what I'm doing, instantiating my appendages. For each of my appendages, I'm going to do this little dance, I guess, where I put it in, put it out. What happens when I put it out? Oh, I guess I'm printing out the Hokey Pokey song. Is the end of the story here. So step over, shake it all about, do the Hokey Pokey. Okay, this is suspicious. I'm rehearsing and there's no end in sight for this. So maybe I want to fix this bug. So I'll make this just do the Hokey Pokey. That should fix things up. So at this point, I could actually keep going, and you can see it evaluates based on the code that wasn't there before, or that was there before. So I'll actually have to start over and run it again, but this time I should have. And so just hit the breakpoint. If I delete the breakpoint and stop it and run it again. Great, I just got one round of Hokey Pokey. That's all I can handle. So, got my head and my feet. If you're interested in my full object-oriented Hokey Pokey implementation, you can find it online. All right, but for now, back to. So the next thing I want to show you, which is more practical possibly than anything I've showed you so far, is how to actually build Windows applications in Python. And I put applications in quotes because there's a lot of the word app is kind of loaded these days, and you don't know what device you're talking about running it on or what it means. Windows is talking a lot about Windows 8 apps, which are these things that run in the new Metro UI. This thing, if you've seen it before. So actually, I'll show you. If I wanted to open up music, it's kind of this full screen experience with, it's designed. The premise of Microsoft's Windows 8 release, for better or for worse, was that it was one experience across all of your devices, and then you could run Windows 8 or Windows 8 RT on your desktop or on your tablet, and it would kind of make sense across all of these things, right? They compared it to the iOS versus Mac desktop. It's not the same. Kind of made this decision. I'm not going to make a value judgment on it that much, but that basically there are these tablet-style apps that run on the desktop. So anyway, it's the end of the story. Is I'm not going to focus on those. The things that I'm going to focus on are the things you should care about. So who's using Windows? 90% of people who use operating systems are using Windows. Mac has 7.5%, which actually, I was surprised to see this. And within Windows, most people are still on Windows 7. Windows 8, I think people are still migrating, and 8.1, I'm equally surprised that people have migrated that fast to 8.1. But anyway, the things that kind of apply to all of these are the standard Windows desktop applications like Office. There's a lot of productivity apps, a lot of business apps that people, this 90% of people are using and will continue to use regardless of if Microsoft kind of tablet-oriented interface, the Escher interface, or modern UI interface actually catches on. Something else that's interesting to think about is Windows Phone. So again, we can make our bets about how well Windows Phone is going to do, but it's certainly picking up traction. I don't think Windows Phone is a serious threat for Apple, since people who want Apple devices know they want Apple devices, but it certainly has a very polished user interface, and I was happy with mine, more happy than with my experience with Android previously. So Windows Phone, I think, is also something important to consider as you're thinking about who should I be building for. So yeah, people use Windows, and it's a good reason to be thinking about targeting. So when you're thinking about building a native GUI app on Windows, you have a couple of options. The principal options are something called WinForms, a technology called WinForms that has been around forever, and this kind of newer thing called WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, I believe, which is a little bit more MVC. It's actually called MVVM, Model View Model, whatever. Yeah, again, whatever that means. And this is kind of the new preferred by almost everyone I've talked to way of doing things. Except the only advantage of Windows Forms may be that it has a lot of history, a lot of support, but the general sense I get from people is that the comparison can be reduced to old and ugly and new and snazzy. So how does WPF work? WPF is fundamentally markup code that defines the user interface, which is called XAML, which is XML based and basically define what your user interface elements are. So we have up here the title of the window you can see in the window tag. We have the width and the height. We define, I think my mouse, yes. We define a class that this window is going to obey, and I'll talk about that in a second. And we can add a button by kind of closing, the same way that we would add an element in HTML. We can enclose an element in the parent tag in XAML and put a button inside the window. Yep.
If the text in the button was to be Japanese,
yes,
would that be okay?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
I spent time debugging this in Microsoft. It's just, when you're a first-year engineer showing up, they give you the tasks like, in Japanese, this is one character too long and it doesn't look good. Things like that. So yeah, I can confirm that
it does Unicode.
It does Unicode localization. It's actually Visual Studio, and there's good support for localization in terms of organizing that as well as just displaying various text. So behind this is something called the code behind, which is traditionally C#. I'm going to show you how to do this on Python. That's why we're here. But I'll show you the C# example first to show you how it's usually done. And you have a lot more lines than you have in Python, so we can all do it C# together. So here's the class A window that you saw before. And basically, this is inherited from window, so you know that you're building a window based on a certain set of routines here. And I've attached a handler here for button click. As you see above, I had the button click handler there in the button tag. So the button click handler sends up a message box that says, hello, Windows Presentation Foundation. If I said it wrong before, I said it right now. Click the button and you see this thing. So if you go deeper than that, this is the basic UI layout in the XAML, and then the code behind is where you wire up the basic event listeners and fundamentally the things that govern how the UI elements behave, not necessarily how the data behind them works. So I mentioned this MVVM design pattern, which I think I like better than MVC, but I really don't know if I understand either of them. But MVVM is model view view model. Model means your business logic and your data, which is the same as MVC. V is also the same as MVC, which is the view, which is basically what I just showed you. Both the markup and XAML and the code behind are part of the quote-unquote view. And then there's something called the view model, which is deeper than just defining what buttons do or what data is displayed, but it determines how that changes according to your model. So if you have multiple widgets on the same page that depend on one another and share data and send updates between each other, that's encapsulated in your view model. And I'll show you an example of how this is kind of architected in general, and I'll show you it in Python. So the view model, as I said, holds the states of the view, defines the manipulation logic rather than the actual manipulation. So data binding is the mechanism between the view and the view model, which basically means that updates are sent both ways. So my next demo is how to build your first actually Windows yeah, I showed you a console application that was hello world and hokey pokey, but now I'll show you how to make a proper Windows application. Sorry, once again. So, slightly more practical, but also not too exciting. I have this Fahrenheit to Celsius converter GUI app. So, I can type in, I don't know, 100 degrees Celsius, and it updates in real time to show me that that's 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So, very basic, but kind of shows the traditional way to architect these apps. And so I'll take you into the code now and start debugging. And I'll show you basically how this is laid out.
This is an app you can actually debug on the Microsoft.
This is not a, so I used the dirty word app, didn't I?
Oh.
This is a, that's exactly where I put that slide in. So, this is a Windows desktop application.
Oh.
This is something that your father would have used. So actually I can, yeah. So I would love to show you, I don't know where this is immediately. Come on, Windows 8. Okay, anyway, I don't want to take a ton of time searching through my file directory right now, so I'll just explain it. When you click debug, it actually builds it into a .exe file, so a Microsoft or Windows executable, and it sends it into the bin folder of the application. And if you actually go to that folder, actually maybe I'll find it here. Yes, actually Visual Studio says it there, not Windows 8. This is so here I have my Celsius converter. Okay, so this is the folder where my Celsius converter project is. What's that? Yes. I can use Git. Git was actually a new addition to Visual Studio in the beginning of 2013. So I can't find this right now. I don't want to delay, but also I'll just describe it. So the executable file actually gets created in a folder, and this can either be a debug build or a release build. And at that point, once you actually have the executable, and sometimes there'll be libraries that also appear in that folder, you can just run them. You can put it in your start menu. There isn't a start menu anymore, I guess. You can put them in your taskbar and run them the way you run any other Windows application. Sorry, I can't demo that. So let's start looking at this code to build this Fahrenheit Celsius converter. So there's a couple of imports, and these are the same imports you'd see basically in the C# version of this, but they exist for Python. So this is the things to do all the background stuff, like reading the XAML file. I want to be able to actually create a window. And I have this thing called iNotify property changed, which is, if you're thinking in the Java or C# sense, it's this interface that you implement in order to have the data binding work. So when a property of your class changes, that this is actually listened to by something else, and that will be the view probably, or the view model, staying in touch with each other. You see that things are updated. In Python, it's actually going to look like a method decorator. So here is the kind of boilerplate that's required to wire up this property notification. I won't go too deep into this, but basically this lets you create the notify property here is the actual method decorator, I believe. And the setter method here is what's going to be used to attach basically rather than just having a property of your viewModel class, there's going to be a setter to be called to set that property. This is more of the boilerplate. I'll skip ahead to the viewModel that I talked about before. So viewModel has these, they're underscored to show that they are instance variables rather than properties. So we have the model instance, which defines business logic. We have the Celsius value here, which is a string. The Fahrenheit value, which is a string, and the Celsius focus, which is a rule that tells me whether Celsius is selected or not. So these are the fundamental, like if I at any point have my application open and I have, I type something in, then this will be my Celsius value, this will be my Fahrenheit value, and my Celsius focus right now is true, now it is false. So in some sense, this kind of shows you how the viewModel is the thing that holds the data of the application in this design panel. So beyond that, there are functions that swap focus. So this, for example, if I click on the Fahrenheit box and Celsius is selected, it will call this swap focus Celsius value. So this Celsius value, I may be saying some things that people who are familiar with this kind of design pattern are already familiar with, but for the sake of anyone who hasn't seen this kind of thing before, I'll go into the details. Celsius value, capital C, is the property that that kind of wraps it up. So notify property that Celsius value is something that when I use Celsius value, capital C, capital V, a notification will be sent out to anything that's listening. And then if I call Celsius value, if I ask for it, I'm going to get this value that the class has, Celsius value. So I'm never actually setting Celsius value directly. I'm using this wrapper. And that's what allows us to kind of latch onto these events where it's either accessed or modified.
Other things that do the opposite, take your application and you can write code to test it.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, what I mean is other tools to take Windows desktop application and it might be and you can write test to locate the controls in the application.
Anything that's in .NET supports a certain level of that through reflection, which is also something I'm in the long list of things I'm not qualified to talk about. But I think the short answer is no. But if you basically anything that's out there and written in Python, there's a fairly good relative size, I guess, of Python open source projects to .NET open source projects. And then if you're looking for examples, I guess, then you'll be able to see it. But you won't actually be able to go into an existing application and understand it in terms of Python. Unfortunately. So again, there's the Fahrenheit value, which is wrapped. There's the Fahrenheit value setter. And here the setter is basically calling that if I set Fahrenheit to some value, I'm using my if I set Fahrenheit to some value, then it does some kind of logic before it updates the rest. So this is the way that visually, when I'm running my application, I'm actually setting Fahrenheit and seeing Celsius update, and vice versa. So it uses the setter to see that when I type in 23, or maybe Fahrenheit, because that's the example I thought, if I do 23 Fahrenheit and I type in real time, the setter is being called and actually doing something to the Celsius value as well. So that's, again, this may be really more deep into this design pattern than you guys are interested, but showing you how. So the model, again, holds the kind of, I don't know whose business is just temperature, but the business layer of this application that does convert Celsius to Fahrenheit and convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. So that is the entire quantitative logic of this thing right now. And
actually just use the same symbol.
right, yeah. So
My
Yeah. I will. I need to give a shout out to F# as another language that does that very well. But this is yes, a good this is a good framework, and I guess that's why this design pattern exists, because it allows you to separate your concerns basically and set up with very, if you wanted to ask what my application does, you could just look at these 10 lines, and then there happens to be a GUI on top of it. But this is fundamentally what's going on, and we have it very concisely written out here. So yeah, and if I wanted to throw in, I'm sure I could. Well, I'm not sure, but in front of you, maybe I could even do a dollars to euros converter just by changing some names here and changing some numbers. But I won't attempt that for the sake of getting through the presentation. So then here, actually, so these could be in separate files for the sake of the simple application. This is more of the view logic that I was describing before. So here the window class is described. My window. I open up the XAML. You will see. I think this is really good. Somewhere. So the class of Windows, I'm sure I'm looking for the wrong thing. Anyway, I haven't found it yet. There's obviously some binding in the XAML to this Python view. So for example, Celsius box is something that's defined. And let's see. So Celsius value, this is a direct reference to the view model. So that this tells it that within this text box, the value that's populated there is not only going to display Celsius value, but it's also going to bind to the Celsius value. So this is the relationship between the markup and the Python. Cool. So anyway, at risk of being into the ground, I will stop. But this is kind of how you lay out the basic Windows application with a UI in the framework WPF. And WPF. So I talked a little about Windows Phone. Windows Phone and actually Windows RT, the strictly tablet Windows 8 offering, both can be built for in WPF. They also support HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript. So if you know web development, kind of go in that direction. But in principle, you can write your apps in WPF always, and for desktop apps, you can use Python. I was specifically asked if you're interested in developing for Microsoft Surface, you cannot use Python. I hope that doesn't break any of your hearts. So, the final section I have for you here is so the final section that I promised you, which is the section that was most relevant to me at Microsoft, is building for Windows Azure and building for the cloud. So Python famously has Django as its most popular web development framework, and it makes it easy to build up quick applications and get things done for simple ideas, and to obviously build up more complicated. So, and all of this is supported in Visual Studio, and also the deployment process to Windows Azure is supported. So kind of one of the big advantages, and the reason I included this in the talk, is if you're kind of interested in that end-to-end scenario, you can completely accomplish it with Python in Visual Studio on Windows Azure. So a little bit more about Windows Azure. It is the Microsoft cloud, whereas there is the Amazon cloud, which is Amazon Web Services, or the Google cloud, things like that. This is Microsoft servers, and the PaaS offerings on top of it are all Microsoft. I'll talk a little bit more about what those are, and you can use those with Python. So Windows Azure has been around since 2010. It's been gaining traction pretty steadily, I think, and is, I believe, #2 behind Amazon in terms of total users. I can't find big numbers on this. But 54% of the Fortune 500 use them, and Gartner called them visionary, which this is kind of scary. I don't know what to think about it. Microsoft is certainly way in the back in relation to you, but I don't know how you really interpret it. So I agree that Microsoft is pushing a complete vision. I don't know about the ability to execute, but that is certainly improving, and there's plenty of ways to get the job done. I guess this was the best numbers I could find. If you look through Microsoft's quarterly releases, you'll see a collection of both good and bad things that are going on there. I think if you look at the Internet Explorer and Bing segment, it's usually like, we're taking these losses, but we're going to take them like a champ and do our best. But server and tools, like I said, my boss's whatever, who is now running the company, was a server and tools guy, and that's, I think, where the future of this company is, and I think we're also the great all that time. So it is indeed $1.78 billion up in, or sorry, up 28% this quarter. This represents Azure Office 365, which is the cloud version of Office that Microsoft is pushing out, and Dynamics CRM, which is the CRM, and a number of other things. All right, so how do you get started with Windows Azure? Well, it's easy. You can go online and you can get this $200 free trial, which lasts you, I think it used to be $150, which got you basically a VM for a month, or a VM worth of activity for a month. 200 will get you, I guess, a VM and some database use or some cloud storage use, or however you want to spend it. But certainly enough to get started and see how you like it. Some of those Azure services are actually free up to a certain point, so, and the ones that I'm going to demo for you briefly are among them. So that's a great incentive to get started. So once you're actually signed up for Windows Azure, and they make that very convenient by the previous site, windowsazure.com, that I showed you, you can access your Windows Azure, basically things that you, I don't know what to call them, assets, entities in the abstract sense. So you have your websites, virtual machines, mobile services, SQL databases. They're kind of all in this menu for you. And you look through here and you can see the specific ones and look at their statuses, perform basic administrative actions like resetting them. And it's really, I'm impressed by how refined and kind of clean this UI is and how easy it is to navigate. I'm more impressed by what you can do directly in Visual Studio, because this is actually something that I was building. So I like that. Here, the sidebar, the Server Explorer Visual Studio, you can accomplish a pretty decent subset of things you can do over here. I'll show you that in a second, but the most important actions are over here in the Windows Azure tab on the Server Explorer. You can see all of their assets, so rather than having the browser on separate tab, you can look through and see your storage entities, your databases, your VMs, and your websites. You can create new ones directly from there. So you decide, I want to make a Django app today. You can open up Visual Studio and do your kind of like a Django app rather than popping up over Azure or Google or whatever else you're using, or command line or anything. The entire thing can be taken care of in Visual Studio. So as far as the specific offerings of Visual Studio, I'm trying to go through these really quick. Sure. How am I doing in time?
20 minutes left or so.
Okay. I probably won't use anything. So Windows and Linux VMs will be pretty familiar if you've ever used that. Another show English. How many of you have used Amazon Web Services? Okay, so a bunch of you, more than Azure. And Heroku? Okay. Less than I would have expected. But my previous experience was with Heroku, so that's my main basis for comparison and liking Azure. So basically, you can set up this computer in the cloud and RDP, remote desktop into it. So if you create a Linux VM, you can SSH, or if you create a Windows VM, you can actually use a desktop and play with it as if it were a Windows computer that were actually in front of you. Websites, which are the basic platform as a service, way to host your web applications. So this is what I'm going to show you how you can get a Django application up to Windows Azure in about 5 minutes, I think. And websites, I believe that we can have 10 websites 3. I'm not sure what constitutes an individual website or how far that goes, but this is like a shared hosting thing, and there's no cost, so it's a good thing to try out if you're interested. Mobile services, which is kind of an interesting offering. It's basically a package cloud thing for all of your basic storage, auth, and push notification needs. So if you build a mobile app with Visual Studio, you can basically blaze through and do everything you want to do in directly from Visual Studio. And you need very basic push notifications. Finally, cloud services. These are, I guess, the reference won't make sense to you, but these are called letting work with dynos and Heroku. And these are basically the platform as a service VMs where you write code rather than having to write the kind of wrapper on the VMs in the cloud. You can basically deploy it right away and scale up the number of web processes you have, the number of worker processes you have. So if you have a website that you have, I don't know, building Facebook or something, you have websites scaling up for all users you're getting, workers scaling up for resizing images and stealing all your private data and whatever else Facebook does. So you can scale these independently. It seems like a pretty common paradigm on cloud computing offerings. So storage options, and I specifically on cloud storage visualization, Visual Studio. So Windows Azure has a couple of unique storage options in addition to SQL. One of which is the blob, which is basically unstructured file storage that you can, so you can upload everything from an MP3 to a text file to a virtual hard disk and store these, and you can access them with a RESTful API too if you're interested in that kind of thing. There are things called tables, which are NoSQL, and NoSQL is another word that I kind of don't know what it means. I don't know if anyone really knows what it means because it means so many different things. But tables basically are, I guess I can, you guys are fans of duck type. Don't describe what something is, describe it by what Quack's like. So this thing, the table has rows, and rows have columns. Roughly, instead of being a flat table or a SQL table, each row can possibly have its own set of columns. So this schema is flexible, I guess, which scares me but excites some people. Some people get a special kind of high off of that. So queues are another thing. So this is MS passing. And if you want to insert things into a queue and read them off from another service, so this is, for example, if you have if it's Facebook and you have your website users uploading photos, and you have your worker that's resizing the photos, then you will schedule these tasks from your web roles to your worker roles using queues. And then there's actually a couple of different options for queues. Finally, there's SQL Azure, which is roughly Microsoft SQL Server. I actually on a day-to-day basis, learning about this database offering and how it's slightly different from Microsoft SQL Server. But roughly, if you want to have like a cloud PaaS vendor database, you can use SQL Azure. There's a ton of other things which I learned about, like Hadoop, distributed caching, Active Directory for permissions management, Visual Studio Online, which I mentioned before, which has kind of everything you need to do. Have your development process in the cloud, and there's more. And these are things you can find on Windows Azure. So exciting for you guys, Python is a first-class language in Windows Azure, and actually the reason that the entire Python team at Microsoft was in the Windows Azure hallway is because they're making a huge effort to make a certain set of languages, Python, Ruby, Node.js, and F#, really cloud-suited languages, because that's kind of like the Microsoft vision for the future, that everything is going to be service-oriented, devices and services interacting with each other. So playing these languages up as part of their cloud offering is very important. And I can imagine that Python support is going to continue to get better. So Python client libraries are available. So this basically, if you're running a client app, so you need I don't know, Fahrenheit Celsius converter that takes in temperature data from a cloud data source or something like that. Something that is not just a Windows application, but also interacts with the cloud in some meaningful way. There are client libraries that you can actually use these APIs to interact with certain Windows Azure assets in the cloud. So I'll describe the story really quick for using the table, the NoSQL storage option. So you can open the Azure storage model, you can give their account credentials, create a table, query the table, and add to it. And in code, what that looks like is you import the storage, you import the module that gives you all of the methods for Azure storage assets. Here I've got the table service, so this knows how to talk to these Windows Azure tables. I input my account credentials, and these are my actual account credentials, so you don't have to know. Create a table. So basically here, it's 2 lines. I can create a table service, and in my account name and my account key, I have now created a table in the cloud. Or sorry, the second line is actually when the table is created. So it fires up and goes to Windows Azure and creates a table called my tasks. So when I query the table, I could. This skips a few steps, obviously. If you were just creating a table, you would have to put something in it before you queried it and define. So perhaps the add table should have come before the query table because you don't actually define the schema. So to query the table, it's as simple as calling the query entities. I define which table I want to use. I'm not sure what the middle thing is offhand, and the fields that I want to get. I want to insert an entity. I insert it into my tasks. And then I have this dict here of keys that are column names and values that are the values associated with the column names. Windows Azure tables have 2 kind of privileged values of partition key and row key. Partition key is a larger separation, row key is immediate within partition key. And that's how you design tables in Windows Azure. And then I basically define whatever I want here, and as long as I give it something, presumably when these are valid identifiers, it'll go into the table right away. Since there's no schema, it'll take whatever you throw at it. So anyway, I guess the important thing to take away from this slide is not how a Windows Azure table works, but that you can very concisely access these things from Python. And that it's completely built out how to do these and do it effectively and quickly. So finally, I want to show you guys, actually take you to Visual Studio and show you how you can do your cloud development there. So I'm going to show you how to create a Django project and do some, get started there, not actually build a Django app, and then create an Azure website that we can deploy to, and show you how that works. These things collectively, unfortunately, take like 5 minutes to work, so I won't actually make you sit here and work. But if you're just sitting and working on your own, then it's not that much to stomach. So you can also basically configure, so if you are building a Django app that has some kind of, any meaningful Django app will have some sort of data source that you're interconnecting with other models. So you'll want to use either SQL Azure or table storage via the methods of that. Finally, you can publish directly from the net. So hopefully I'll show you that. So let's hop over to Visual Studio. So actually, this is a step that was kind of implicit before that I didn't actually show you. But to get started, with any Python project, you can just go to, so there's no project open right now in Visual Studio. My solution explorer is empty. And I can add a project to this empty solution by creating a new project. Here you'll see, what will you see? You'll see, I guess, installed, and you'll see C#, light switch, Visual Basic, C++, all the usual suspects if you've ever used Visual Studio before. Finally, down here, you have Python, and within the Python menu, you can do a number of things. So from existing Python code, so if you have a directory that you pulled from GitHub, and it wasn't created in Windows, sorry, in Visual Studio. You just pulled it down from GitHub. Some guy somewhere made it on a Linux box, and it has nothing to do with Visual Studio. You can just open it up from the directory and get started that way. Python application, this is just a standard command line. This is the example that I showed you before with the Hokey Pokey dance. A Django project, which I'm about to open up for you. And then there's various IronPython things, which are how you build WPF and desktop applications with various kinds. Like I said, avoid them. Cool. So I'm going to show you guys a Django project. And getting started is as easy as navigating to that project dialog and clicking new project. So I've got my settings, URLs, and WSGI files here, as well as my Python environments and manage.py. So if I run this, oh yes, there's a step I need to do first. I need to install Django. Actually, let's look at that again. Cool. So this is, I mean, none of us like to think about errors, but this is proof that Visual Studio knows how to take in the errors that it finds in the debugging code and show them to you in a meaningful way. So here it says I have no model named Django for management, and that means that I need to install it. So stop debugging. Did it go well? So I go to Python environments, and I showed you actually did this a little bit before. I can manage my Python environments all. So in this case, in order to be clean, I want to add a virtual environment. I'm going to call it N. Here I can make the selection of which Python implementation I want to use. I'll just use CPython for now, because I haven't tried the other ones. And this is going to create a virtual environment called N for me. Down here you can see the process of that into Visual C if you did this from command line. Okay, cool. I think that was great. View Python executable in scripts Python IDE. That's it. So I've got pip now. Virtual environment successfully created. And here you have this kind of window down here. You can look at your various Python environments and see what's going on. So here's my virtual environment. So now that I have this, usually I would do pip install this or that or from a requirements file. Here I can use this interface to download pip packages, and if I want to use Django, just type in Django and go in there. I don't have it in. So this is actually the one thing I need to Wi-Fi for. So now the video. If you guys will believe me that it went out, you can see here. You can see here that it went out and tried to find Django from pip and install it, but since I have internet, that's not going to work. I will open up instead.
Hey, here's the wire you connect up there for you.
Oh, is that right?
Your Wi-Fi doesn't work.
I'll just pop open one that has Django already. That was fine. So this guy already has a Python environment with a Django already installed. Let's see. Okay, so that's exactly what you can see if you run this in the command line. And congrats on your guys' first Django-powered page on running on Windows. So it's exciting. If I want to go in and actually do something more substantive, I can do that too. I can create a Django app here, and I don't know, maybe I'm building a tool for the oil and gas industry, and I want to make a wells app for my oil wells. Get all the basic generating things you'd expect to see, your index, models, views, and tests. So roughly, like the exciting thing here is that you can use this all in Visual Studio, and if you are a mouse swinger like me, then you can not worry so much about the command line and have a more graphical way to see everything. Do things that way. So this is Django. So the next thing I want to show you is how you can deploy it to Windows Azure. So if I go down to publish, I have these options for. So I believe it's even here. If I just right-click on the thing I want to publish, I click publish, and I get to this dialog. Right, I need internet in order to deploy to it. That makes sense. Sure.
IronPython is right there.
Is it? Okay. I will try in order plugging in and tethering to your iPad. Is that? Thanks. Where's the Ethernet? Underneath there? Find it? Not immediately. Oh, here it is. How long will it go? Is it going to let me on? Thank you, Lincoln.
It might not let you access internet over the Ethernet just because it's like a private network.
Well, let's see. Nice.
All right.
What's wrong with Bing? I told you where my confidence lies in Microsoft, so in division other than that. So anyway, this should work now. So here's the important list. The first page of this wizard, I have select or import a publish profile. So this determines where I'm going to publish to. I can import a new one. As you can see, I'm actually signed into Visual Studio through my Microsoft account. And Microsoft account manages Visual Studio and Windows Azure, all these things. I can either be an Outlook.com email or a Gmail, whatever email you provide, as long as I'm signed up for a Microsoft service before. And if I want to import from a Windows Azure website, so I'm importing publish settings here in order to deploy to a Windows Azure website. So all I have to do is click New, and it's already connected to my account. Just have to log in. And if I'm creating a website, I guess I'll have it in the US. No database for now. I have to enter a website name, likes that one. So this truly is the first talk where someone has done this at this event. So I create that website, and I hope momentarily it will be done. Yep. So I've now created a website on Azure as easily as that without even opening up the management portal. So here I have this new thing, Piggy's demo, generates passwords, connection strings for me. Go through some setting stuff. If I set a debug, I could do some remote debugging, and beyond the scope of this talk, but exciting stuff. And I can click publish, and it will start working on that. This is the one piece of the puzzle that, unfortunately, it brings it from 1 minute up to 5 or 6 minutes. So I can't claim that you can do it in a minute, but in that time, I've showed you how to create an actual cloud compute instance that you're going to be using to run this Django website, and go through the steps to publish it. The one other thing I wanted to show you in Visual Studio, maybe even by the time I finish this, it will be deployed, but we'll see, is the Server Explorer that I showed you before. So if I open up Windows Azure here, like I showed you in the previous slide, you can see basically everything that lives up there. So if I open up websites, I would expect to see this new thing that I created. Yeah, here's piggy's demo. And this gives me the option to stop it, restart it if I've stopped it, open it in the management portal to look at it there, or download, publish. So basically, anything I need, anything I need to do to manage what's going on in Windows Azure, I can do right now. Particularly, so if I want to build a table, like I talked about before, a NoSQL table, I can build in the so as quickly as that, I've just created a NoSQL table in the doc that Windows Azure is managing for me. So if I pop this thing open, here I basically have I have the table, and if I want to, for example, if I had existing data there, I would view it, and it would all be there, and I could basically add or delete these rows. And if I wanted to add data, and I have no idea how this works, I have a query builder that lets me do it. So if you are if you're interested in managing these Windows Azure type of data sources, which are not just SQL, they're kind of more specialized, and you don't know how to use them, the short story is there's some pretty convenient ways that you can open them up, have a nice interface, you kind of learn them as you go. So if I don't know what blob is, I can open up this blob, I can see upload blob, through the file. And now in this blob storage, I have this license.txt file stored. This is the URL endpoint that I can access it if I have a REST application and I want to access these files. So the point here is that, oh wow, I finished uploading. I talked for long enough. Come on. Django to Windows Azure in 5 minutes. Good. All right. So yeah, this is, I think, and not only 5 minutes, there's a lot of places that you can build your first app and deploy in 5 minutes from command line or whatever, but I particularly enjoy the fact that you can open up Visual Studio and do this entire thing and figure it out pretty quickly if you've never done it before.
That's all possible to do, right?
At risk of making you unhappy in a couple hours, yes. I'm pretty sure it is. I have been using the professional ultimate version for so long that I haven't. It didn't come to me to try the free version, but that is probably very relevant to you guys who are thinking about trying this for the first time. I am pretty sure that all of this works. Microsoft they have a free trial of Windows Azure. They're trying to get people involved in this, so I would suspect that the basic Visual Studio.
But all the deploying of that is normally that's how
the steps that I went through. You're asking about the specific steps that I went through. Yeah, I can't unfortunately verify that right now for you, but I would put money on it that it is. Yeah, so if I want to manage my storage, I can run about here and I can start a application and go end to end right here at Visual Studio. Anyway, final thoughts. I guess there's really just one final thought, which is I hope you will think of this for your next Python project, and I hope I've made a somewhat compelling case that there are good things to be had for Python on Windows, and also kind of good reasons to do it with other people who are using it. So, thank you all for having me. So I have a hard hat full of business cards here if you are interested in learning more about what I do professionally and why I'm excited about it, or anything more about Python for Visual Studio. If I can answer your question, which I probably can't, I can get you on an email chain if you do that. So that's all I have. But that's, you might have grabbed it wrong. You now have disciplines. That's right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I think you got all that.
Will you do announcements or computer jobs, software jobs? Oh, okay.
There's a few things that okay. There's a ton of points.